Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Microphone check. Microphone check. Let me know when you hear and see me. Testing, testing. Testing 1 2 3. Hear and see me? Oh, good. Okay. We're good to go. Why is it coming up on my end over here? Let me do a refresh. Okay. We're good. All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to today's lecture. Today, what we are going to be lecturing on is marking the behavior, which is actually the very first checkbox in our obedience checklist. So, what our objectives are today is, what is marking? How do we charge a marker? Prompting versus luring? What is shaping? And when can we check off marking? So this is, as I said, this is the very first box that we check off when we're training a dog in obedience. And remember, since this is a professional dog trainer's course, everything is designed to make it simple for teaching. With that being said, this is the theme of this lecture, is the biggest mistake at this stage is to make it more than what it is. Keep it simple for the client. So what I discovered was unique about marking. Like I said, it's sometimes different parts of the training process seem kind of complicated and you have to really kind of study to get a grip at it. Really, with marking, the biggest mistake people do is, especially when they're trying to teach a client how to do a new behavior, is they show them too much and they expect the client to accomplish too much. Where if you break down the training into little tiny baby steps, they actually move quicker. As you go through this course, you will see that when we train a behavior, something like sit, right? Look at all these boxes we have for sit. It is easier to, when you're training a command such as sit or down or heel, or really any command, to think of the process as a lot of little mini lessons that you're doing with the client, that when, instead of one big lesson, you're not going to go in and say like, okay, today we're going to teach your dog how to sit. It seems simple enough, but because dogs, you're going to be dealing with different dogs with different temperaments that are motivated differently, different environments, different clients with different abilities. Always go into it with the mindset you're doing mini lessons. This is what makes everyone successful. So you're going to be working on sit, but you're going to do as many mini lessons as you can within the lesson. But to the client, you're just calling it a lesson, right? They're paying for your time. Also, if you are doing in kennel projects, it also allows you to be able to keep moving forward with a dog and always know exactly where you left off. So if you're going to be doing a training session with the dog and you're doing a 30-minute training session, you'll be able to mark off exactly where you left off with multiple commands too, as you go side to side on this chart, which you're going to get really good at. So what happens is we see a lot of this chart, right? We see a lot of this chart when we're talking about obedience. And ultimately, what this chart, our obedience checklist, is meant to design and build a command structure that incorporates a lot of communication to the dog, that tells the dog when they're doing something right, to keep doing the behavior, when they're doing it, communicate to the dog when they're doing something wrong. Instead of simply just rewarding and punishing a dog for behavior, we're building confirmation. So we're building communication. So we can literally tell the dog, you are doing right. keep doing what you're doing, good job, without having to physically give the dog rewards all the times, and also could be able to have a conversation with the dog and saying you're doing something wrong right now, fix yourself, without having to punish your dog. But it's all about this checklist, and it starts with marking. So what is marking? I'm going to keep this simple for you too, all right? Marking, you'll hear about marker training, mark that behavior. Marking is just a simple way of saying you are using a conditioned reinforcer or secondary reinforcer, which has to do with classical conditioning. And technically, to understand this lesson, you don't need to know anything about classical conditioning, just like your clients don't need to know anything about classical conditioning, right? So classical conditioning isn't going to be part of this lecture, although you should understand it as a professional dog trainer. For now, what I did is I do have a second lecture just on classical conditioning, which is important for you to know, but not for this lesson. So there is a link over here. But marking is, I say, just a layman's term for teaching a conditioned reinforcer or a secondary reinforcer. So what does that mean? What does that mean to us? It basically means that we're taking something that normally does not mean something to the dog, and something that doesn't mean something to the dog, like the English language, all right, or whatever language that you speak. If I say good girl or good boy to a dog, especially if I just say it in like a neutral tone, that doesn't really mean anything to the dog, right? So before you can really start marking behaviors, we need to have a marker that the dog associates with, oh, I did something good. And it's very versatile what we do, right? So common things that we use is just simple praise. I prefer to use praise as a marker in obedience for pet dogs, because it allows the clients to talk naturally to their dog. So when they're excited, when their dog is doing a good job, they can say good girl or good boy. And that emotional element does add to the picture, does help the dog for sure. But people, depending on what they're doing and for different reasons, they may just keep it real simple and just use like the word yes as a marker. So that's considered a marker, or a clicker. Instead of wanting to verbally say something, someone may choose to use a clicker as a marker. So those are all markers, but each of those things, the word yes, a click, or even saying good boy or good girl, mean nothing to the dog, and you cannot start to mark behaviors unless they understand the marker. The good thing is once the dog understands a marker, you can use that marker for all the training. So what we want to know about is like, what is charging the marker? And also, I also want to talk about skipping the charge. Do we even really have to do this step? All right. So first, I want to talk about charging a marker. We need a dog to understand this, that, oh, when I say good boy, or I say yes, or I click, that means something. Now you can, and we have a video on it that Teresa did, charging the marker, which is very, very simple, and it's, let me play this. It's super simple. I'll take
work on an exercise.
Put the volume down. But basically all it is making sure you're spending the time. Let's see. She's just going to be praising the dog
on inappropriate behavior.
Let's say.
Good girl.
All right.
Good girl.
All she's basically doing is, of course, we don't want to encourage a bad behavior, is anytime really the dog is doing anything, if she says good girl, she's just giving the dog a treat. Being very, very careful not to do this while the dog is doing a bad behavior. And what she's looking for is that when she says good girl, that she sees an emotional response from the dog. That the dog is expecting, oh, I hear good girl, I get a reward. Now, when we don't always need to charge a marker, and I'll tell you why. That the average pet person, I usually don't spend, if I'm working with a client, the average client, I generally don't have them spend time, do much of this before the obedience, because the average pet owner is going to be using something that they've naturally been doing with their pet so far. They've been saying good girl or they're saying good boy. So whenever they're petting the dog or they see the dog or the dog is doing good things, the dog is usually used to hearing good girl or good boy and associating it with the owners being happy, all right? If that is the case, I don't suggest like spending a whole lesson or a big chunk of the lesson teaching the owners how to charge a marker, because it's going to happen. We're going to be even charging the marker as soon as we start training behaviors to the dog. It happens automatically, but it is good that they understand that the concept. The most important concept that they need to know about this, that you need to teach them, is just simply to make sure they use their marker word before they give the reward. When they see a behavior that they like, they're going to give their marker, and then they're going to give the reward, all right? So they're going to say good girl, and they're going to love their dog up, or they're going to say good boy, or they're going to give a treat, or they're going to say good boy and they're going to give the toy, all right? The marker always precedes something that the dog really likes, all right? But you do need a marker. Every dog that we're trained, they need to have a marker that we can use in the training that the dog definitely associates with good things, with doing something right. So that is definitely number one that we need to do, that we need to do. Now, when are times where we definitely probably want to charge a marker? I would say times that you would want to charge a marker are dogs with limited human interaction, especially with whoever's going to train the dog. So I'll give you an example. Once I was helping out a shelter to train some of their more difficult shelter dogs that were there for years and were highly unadoptable, and hardly anyone ever used to handle these dogs at all. So they were just mostly in a kennel for years, not dealing with anyone. Most of their interaction was based off of just food being dropped in their kennels and stuff like that, and being switched from one kennel to another. So I spent time before I started working with those dogs is going by their pens, and simply, there was a bunch of them I was working with, and depending if it was a male or female dog, I would just say good boy or good girl and give treats through the chain link fence to the dogs. And I spent doing, especially if it was a dog that I was just getting the dog used to my presence, or I knew I was going to work with in the future, I would always go around and just say good boy, good girl, and give treats. Good boy, treat. Good girl, treat. Good boy, treat. And I would do that. So that would really help. It also helps if someone's using something completely different, like a clicker, right? If someone's going to use a clicker, something the dog normally doesn't hear, is you want to see, someone should spend a time just click, treat, click, treat, click, treat, until the handler notices when they hear the click, the animal's gets excited, like they're expecting something, all right? So very good too if a dog, for instance, shelter dogs that may have different volunteers and things like that working with them, clicker training is a good marker because everyone praises a little bit differently and stuff like that, and it keeps people consistent. So there's different reasons to do that. And if someone, perhaps someone imports a dog from another country, an adult dog that they want to train, and was trained in a different language or something like that, again, you can spend some time doing it. But the good news is this is easy. It's very, very simple concept, all right? Next is, what is prompting? We're going to need to know prompting, and easy. This is, early training is early concepts. Prompting is absolutely anything that you do to encourage a dog to perform the behavior that you want. So we're going to hear prompting when we're training a dog. That's anything. Now, to get a little more detailed, there's also luring. We should be using the terms prompting, and we should be using the word luring, and they're not the same thing, right? Luring is a type of prompt, all right, that specifically involves just having the dog follow something. So we use it a lot in teaching obedience, where we want the dog to make a specific movement. So prompting is anything that we do to get the dog to do a behavior. And luring is specifically getting the dog to follow something. And I'll give you an example. So I just do some videos up over here. Let's see. So for instance, prompting. Suppose you're training a dog to do, in this example, we were training Orfeo to do scent detection, to get started on scent detection. And all that we wanted him to do in the beginning was just to stick his nose on an object that had the scent, all right? So prompting him to do that could be something as simple as having him in a command and presenting, just showing him, just holding something in our hand that we want to put him his nose on. And since we know he is curious, he's gonna be like, what is that? Is that for me? We could predict that just putting it in front of him was probably going to get him to go and check it out. And that's a prompt. But then as soon as he puts his nose on it, there's our marker, all right? Good boy. Let me just say good boy, all right? And as long as we can consistently now get him to do that behavior where we prompt any way that we can do it. In this case, we're just holding it. If it's in our hand, he's going to go stick his nose, and we mark him, good boy, and we're going to give him a reward. As long as we can do that consistently, we're able to mark the behavior. So we'll show you very quickly with this. This was at the, whoops, at the 125 mark, I think. Let's see, then I got that. So, real simple. And this was some words here. All he does is Judy just holds the bottle.
Whenever you're ready.
Good boy.
You see that? So we did not do anything fancy to get him to put his nose. There's a little, like one of those mini shampoo bottles like you get like at a hotel. I buy them like in bulk for scent detection for this type of training, like the empty ones. We know Judy well. We know Orfeo well enough that she's holding something in his hand. He's like, "What do you got there? Is that for me?" So he's gonna go investigate it. All right. So she put him in a down. She gave him a command, which he doesn't even know yet. He wouldn't even know yet what that means at this point. And he's just curious. What do you have? As soon as he puts his nose to it, she just marked it. Good boy. And she gave him a treat. And that's really it.
Good boy.
All right. That's an example of using a prompt. Other examples of prompts are things like suppose you're teaching a dog to do, you want to teach a dog for, say, a movie or a commercial to put its paw on its nose, all right? You could put a piece of tape on the dog's nose. That will annoy the dog. And then when the dog goes to rub it off with his paw, you may mark it with the clicker or the praise or whatever, all right? That's a prompt. The moment they did it, you just marked the behavior, all right? So marking, if you can get the dog to do something consistently with a prompt, you have marked the behavior. And you can try this. Like you could just take your dog at home. You can take anything that you want to get your dog to start training your dog to do. You could grab a water bottle, simply just have the dog on a leash so the dog can't go anywhere, show the dog the water bottle, put it down. The dog checks it out and sniffs it. You mark it, right? You just prompted the dog to interact with this. You mark it. And if the dog will consistently do that, you at least have marked the behavior to at least interact with the water bottle. All right. So we're keeping it simple right now. Let's see. Next, I want to show you now there's luring. All right. Luring is having the dog follow something. So generally we're doing treats. You can do a toy. Usually treats or toys are the most important thing. I would say the food is the easiest thing to lure with the dog. But let's see, it's probably like the 45-second mark over here.
Back, my lady.
So
Sit. Good girl.
Classic is the down, right? Where
Then lure her down. Good girl.
the dogs are just gonna follow.
Girl.
they're gonna follow their nose,
position.
right?
I'm
So
gonna have the treat to her nose straight down to the floor. Good girl. You want to aim to have the treat straight from their nose and drop it in between their front legs. What can happen if you go too far forward? It's a common mistake. Oh, you're such a good.
all right. So luring is simple. Follow is having the dog follow. Now you can combine luring with different types of prompts. So for is anything you do to encourage. For example, if I jump ahead over here to about the 3-minute mark, Teresa, even though this dog right here, Gypsy, is doing the down completely with just the lure, she may also use another sort of prompt. Like for example, over here in this video, all she simply does is she demonstrates if she was having a dog that she couldn't get the dog to lower its back end all the way or going completely to the down, she would also lure underneath her arm. So the dog would have to sort of like duck underneath the arm and is more likely to go into the down, right? So I'll show you that quick. You know, it's just an example of she's using her arm over here.
Like you're not going to go in the down position. Let's see. When her head is lowered down, I'm going to use my arm to create sort of like a tunnel that she has to go over. Good girl.
All right.
So I'm not pushing.
Okay, so you can lure and you can use sort of prompting. And this is what you need to know as a professional dog trainer, is you need to be able to think outside the box. You'd be surprised at how many dogs, you'll be doing a lesson, you'll be doing a group class and you want to work on the word down. You'll be surprised of how many dogs for different reasons just don't want to go into the down, or don't understand, not that they don't want to go into the down, don't understand the word down, and for other reasons too, are just, they're resistant to going into the down. It's not something that they're ready to do very quickly. So you want to be creative and think of what is all the things I could possibly do that could help get this dog into the down. So not only is it luring, you could do different sort of prompts with the dogs. Like for example, a slick floor, like a slick floor, like a kitchen floor, could be an easier way to prompt the dog to go into the down, because if you're doing this luring, sometimes it's just harder for them to keep their grip and they slide easier just because it's more comfortable, right? Any of that sort of stuff is going to be a prompt that makes it easier for you. Another example of like luring too is just to show, and I'm showing this because it's simple, all right? Notice these dogs. We are not talking about the dog hearing a command and the dog knowing what to do, all right? We don't talk about, the first stage with a client is just, can you get the dog to do the behavior? Any way you can. Don't worry about the command yet, all right? Don't even worry about the command. Do you know a way to get the dog to do that command, all right? So something like, which might seem overwhelming to a client at first, it's like, all right, we want to teach the dog to go lay down on a mat, all right? But if we be like, all right, we're going to say the name, and then we're going to lead the dog over, and we're going to, we're going to give the command, and we can do it, it's going to be harder for the dog. If we just start off with, can we just get the dog consistently to get on the mat? Consistently, with any kind of prompt that you can. We're working on the mark. Then this is going to make it so it is much easier, right? So it's much easier for a client. So for example, over here with like a place command.
The goal of teaching place is to have your dog go to a specific spot, like a bed or a mat. So it's just going to be, you want to do it in one sweeping motion. You're going to be directing them onto the mat and straight down. Good girl. Good girl.
So something like this is not going to be very intimidating to a client. It's like, all right, can we do this? Can we get the dog onto the mat? All right. It's just onto the mat, and that's simple. So for something like what we see here with a place or down or a sit or even a heel, just getting the dog to go into the heel position, all that we're looking at, this first stage over here, I'll show you. I'm jumping around a bit over here. Is is when can we mark off this checkbox over here? It is when the dog can consistently be prompted to do the complete behavior, whatever behavior you're really looking for, and it's in its simplest form. So if we're doing, let's say, reload. Oh, I got to reload my page. Use this extension here. Hold on, give me one moment here. Is if we want to, let's go over here. So we're teaching a client how to do place. All right. This is the first. You want to give them a win. All right. So can you get your dog to just lay down on that mat and consistently? All right. Consistently. Can you mark the behavior? All right. You're circling it when they're working on it. You're working on the down. Can they get the dog to at least go into the down position? When I'm using the checklist, I like to just circle these things with the clients. All right. Once they can consistently get the dog to go with the prompt, not with the command, just with leading the dog in, you give them a win. You exit off. Congratulations! Look, we're moving forward. All right. It encourages them. It encourages the dog. It makes the dog successful right off the bat, and it makes the client right off the bat. All right. Keep it simple. All right. These are little wins. The dogs are doing that really well, even within one lesson. All right. One lesson's like, wow, we're doing good. We can move to the next, step, which is then fading off of the prompts and stuff like that. But don't worry about it. As a matter of fact, I started having this stuff, putting this stuff in the lecture, and I was like, I'm going to divide it into another lecture, because I think you don't want to make this complicated, because sometimes the client just getting the dog into the behavior itself is hard enough for them. All right. So we want to make something that could definitely be, that they can definitely be successful at. One of the hardest things for some owners, I talked about it, is just getting the dog actually initially into the down command. So this is where shaping comes into play. You want to understand basic shaping, and you want the clients, even if they don't know how to explain it scientifically, what shaping is, they don't even need to know what the word shaping is, but you want them to know that their dog does not have to do anything perfectly in order for them to mark it. What shaping is just reinforcing successive approximations to the goal behavior. All right. So if we cannot get that goal behavior from the dog with the client, so you have a client and they have a little dachshund, and they're so close to the ground already with their short little legs, they're trying to lure the dachshund, and the dachshund's like, I don't have to lay down. My head just touches the ground. All right. This makes it really hard. Or one of these English bulldogs, or they just you got an older dog and it's big and it doesn't want to go all the way down on the floor. It doesn't want to stand all the way back up. There's lots of different reasons why the dogs just don't easily want to lay down, or they're not motivated to lay down. So what shaping is, it's just the best trick to make a dog, and this is not just for the down, giving the down as an example, would be just rewarding the dog. You would tell them you can't get the dog to go down. What's at least a little bit, what's the closest you can get the dog to do? And it may be just the dog leaning its head down. If they just lure the dog so its head is lower down, they could reward for that. And they could just reward for that and try to get the dog to do a little bit more, like maybe bend its elbows a little bit. And then they could mark for that. But the thing about shaping, the trick to shaping is you encourage is once you get the dog to do a little bit more and the dog understands it, you don't mark anymore for the previous behavior. That was not closer to the behavior that you want. All right. And there's, again, in this video over here with Teresa with the down, you could see an example with this puppy, the puppy over here.
Bend their head down to the ground, and that's it. Or to get a slight bend in an elbow, and then you end your session.
So that might be it. All right.
Down.
Well, dog does the down there.
Good boy.
I jumped it ahead too much.
And then you end your session.
Let's say.
Good boy. Word for a head bob. Good boy. Once they're comfortable, approximations, meaning that you're getting something close to what you want. So, for example, if the end result that we want is them to be laying on the floor, we may even just reward them for putting their head down and then giving the reward there, if that's as far as they can go, or as far as they're willing to go. Just reward for a head bob. Good boy. Once they're comfortable and successful at that level, then you're just going to ask them to do a little bit more, like maybe bending their elbows. A little elbow dip. Good boy. Good boy.
And the dog did it. So you get the idea. And real common way that I will shape a dog for the down, we get these little dachshunds and stuff like that, is I actually tend to, it's okay. You can rapid fire. You can rapid fire with the mark and the right behavior. There's a lot of these dogs that are difficult with the down. What I do is I'll have a lot of treats, right? I'll have a lot of treats in my hand, and the dog dips its head. I'll keep marking, all right? Good boy, good boy, good boy. And then I'll even lower it a little bit more. And as long as they don't dip their head, put their head back up, I'll keep marking. That's right, that's right, that's right. And a lot of them just start getting lazy even about bending their head and then their elbows. If they go back up, they no longer get rewarded for up there. They only get rewarded for where I am. Then eventually, I've never had a dog that just didn't eventually like plop on the ground. Usually even in one session, because they're like, all right, especially if you do like on a slippery floor, right? You do it on a floor, it doesn't have a lot of good grip. At that point, I usually big good boy and give him even more treats, right? And then it's easier, all right? So in that case, if I'm shaping, if I'm shaping a behavior or clients shaping a behavior, let's say for the down, go back over here. With the down here too, this would be a goal. You'd be like, we're working on marking the behavior for the down, and you can teach them how to shape, but it does not get X'd off in that case until they can consistently get the dog to go completely into the down. Another example is something like with heeling, where if we want to teach the owner how to get the dog to heel, first, they just need to be able to mark the dog when it gets in the correct position. So, we want the dog to be able to go with a prompt, right? Parallel behind the left heel. But sometimes the owner just cannot get the dog completely behind or nice and parallel. You tell them, don't worry about it. It was like, just reward the dog for the best ones you can get from the dog. And then once you get those better ones, reward them for the better ones out of those, and don't reward the dog for the initial ones that were not as good. And then eventually they can get the dog into the heel, right? So we have videos on how to lure the dog into a heel position, but that's just how you use the checklist here, right? So it'd be the same thing. So if they were doing heel, same thing. They would circle it. And then maybe the following week, you check in on the client and they got the dog going nice into the heel position. You say, congratulations, right? You can exit off. And even if for some reason they did not have it X'd off and they were still working on it, it's fine. So say they're working on the down, they were working on the heel, and they were only able to accomplish the down. That is fine. You tell them, okay, keep working on that. And you move forward with other commands, all right? This is how it works. This is why I hate, I suggest as a professional trainer, don't make an outline of what you're gonna do every week with the client. Is always charge for your time. You can give estimates, and they get stuck on something. You just move along laterally on the chart and do what you want, and just move along that way. Then within that same lesson, they probably might jump ahead with some other things instead of stressing about the other one. And then you come back the following week and they may have that heel because they were practicing, right? You made some progress during the lesson there, all right? Let's see. Next is, what is the, yeah, so Very, very easy. All right. So marking, so we mark off the check boxes simply when they're able to go, when they're able to do the behavior. Now, knowing what this is just as important as knowing what it is not. All right. Um, fading. Fading off of the prompt. I always like to reserve that as a separate mini lesson, meaning um, let the clients be successful in just getting the dog to do the commands. And you will be surprised at how many professional dog trainers, when you're getting paid to do a job, is most dogs, if the owners have had them for a while and they're not just a little puppy, know quite a bit with prompts, but not true commands or cues. Like you'll be surprised at how many dogs owners can get the dog to lay down, but they have to like bend over to the ground, right? Or they can get the dog to come, but they might have to like clap their hands and run backwards and act all excited, and the dog is mostly responding from that. All right, that is all prompts. All right, that is all prompts. What you're working on is you're formalizing it for them. You're like, you can get this dog to consistently do the behavior. We know the prompt that you're using, but you're consistently marking it with something consistent and predictable to the dog. All right, good boy, or yes, or a clicker. All right, most pet dogs, I suggest good boy. All right. Now, what is next is going to be fading off the prompt. All right, fading off the prompt is we need the dog to do the behavior with a chosen final cue, signal, or command without any prompting at all. All right. So that is what this one is about over here, right? So if we have a check off for down, they can finally get that dog to go into the down. Is then whether it be the down or any command, we want that client to be able to just stand straight up. If they don't want to ever have to put their grocery down, bend over to the ground, or do anything, and just simply stand straight up and tell their dog down, the dog knows to go into the down. That involves fading off the prompt, fading off of the lure. All right. So that I'm going to reserve for a next lecture, because there's tricks and considerations that if you make sure you separate it, make it a separate checkbox, it's easier for the clients to understand a lot of little easy lessons. If you jump ahead and try to teach the dog how to fade before they completely understand the concept of just creating the behavior, I'm telling you from experience, it is the most common, it's the most common broken link in the checklist, where the owners think their dog understands the command, and they may be way down here. Even professional trainers, when I'm troubleshooting, they're working on all this stuff down here, and they think the dog really knows what down means, or really knows what sit means or come means, where the prompts were never completely faded off. You have to be aware of it from day one, or else all new trainers will deal with it. You'll deal with the client, or you'll deal with it even yourself, even if you do it in kennel, where you think the dog is complete with the training, and we don't even realize the prompts that we're giving the dog, right? Where we don't realize we're still bobbing our head when we're telling the dog to down, and the dog is paying attention to the head bob and not the word down. So then we hand over that dog to the client, and they're not bobbing their head. When they say down, we're scratching our head, I thought the dog knew the command. Why is the dog not going down? And then what happens in the further training? People start punishing the dog, thinking the dog is truly disobeying, where it's going to be associated with what we call false disobedience, where the dog is just ignorant. We think the dog is disobeying, but the dog is hearing a word, but they were paying attention to this the whole time. Where you could be saying mashed potatoes, spaghetti and meatballs, and bobbing your head, and the dog probably have went down. All right, so that will be next lesson. And let's see, I got some chitter chatter over here. Arthur says sometimes the best is the enemy of the better. If so, settle for better and praise the client. Good client. Yeah, good point, Art. Is remember, these lessons are meant for professional dog trainers teaching clients. It is so important that your client and the dog has a good experience in the lesson. Most people who call for help from a dog trainer, they're frustrated. They want to enjoy the training with the dog. They may call you and say, I want to teach my dog obedience. I want to teach the dog to not pull on the leash. I want to fix this problem. But the common denominator, if you kept asking why do you want to do that? Why? The common denominator, every single person that calls you, is they want to enjoy their time with their dog. All right. So if you even make the training session enjoyable and you give them wins and you make it simple, they're paying for your hour, right? It is much better that you make them successful in that hour, just marking a bunch of behaviors, show them how to get the dog to go to the down and the sit and the climb into a heel position. Give them things to do. They're paying for your time. Use it instead of trying to do too much with one command and too many concepts. If you teach them one concept, they can apply that concept across the board with all kinds of things, and they're having fun, and they're teaching things to their dog that you didn't even tell them to do. All right, they're starting to work on other things. The dog going to different areas of the house, or touching things, or interacting, or picking up objects. All right, we'll dive deeper into this. Like anything that seems too complicated to mark, and you cannot accomplish it with simple just shaping. All right. There's going to be chaining, which we do have a 4.0 lesson on, and I'm going to probably update it and do a 5.0 lesson. Chaining is when their behavior involves multiple steps from the dog, like a lot of assistant dog type of work, right? Like they want their dog, you want to train a dog to open a refrigerator and bring something out of the refrigerator, or pick up a dropped remote control and give it to the owner. Anything that seems too complicated to accomplish by just simple marking and simple shaping is usually reserved for chaining. So anything that leaves questions, is going to be chaining, which we do have lectures on that, but we're going to improve upon it. All right. So to recap for today is, let's go to the top. What is marking? All right. Marking is it's our layman's term for creating a condition reinforcer. So that's our praise. All right. And that's we're building, right? That's what we're building is, every checkbox helps with our command structure. Is we cannot have, this is where the dog learns praise, what it means. Notice here, it doesn't say praise and reward, all right? Reward comes afterwards. So we have to, did the dog obey? Did the dog obey? And then if it did, praise. That's what we're building right here, is the dog understanding that and the owner understanding it. So this whole thing is going to be easier to understand when we just piece by piece, we're just teaching them that, all right? So it's just a simple way of building that condition reinforcer, right? And then that's the primary reinforcer when they get the reward afterwards. But we get into the reward schedules, when you go down the phase one. How do we charge a marker? Very simple, all right? Just use your marker, give a reward. Use a marker, give a reward. Once the dog, you see that there's a response before they even get the reward, an emotional response, we have the marker. And usually it happens automatically when you do the training. You don't really have to take your time to make a lesson out of it, unless it's a dog that hasn't had a lot of human interaction, or you want to change the marker, those sort of things. It becomes kind of obvious sometimes when you want to change the marker. Prompting versus luring, really easy, right? Prompt is anything you do to get the dog to do the behavior. You'll be surprised if you put a dog and you just put it inside of a little teeny tiny room, or a little you get like baby fences, baby gates, and you make a little tiny area and you stand in there with the dog and you put anything on the ground there, anything that you want the dog to interact with, it is very easy to prompt the dog to interact with that and to be able to mark it. Then once you can mark one behavior, it's pretty easy to shape something. So so shaping includes even free shaping. Free shaping is when you're shaping without luring, without really touching the animal, just using prompts in the environment. So you can shape with enough patience, you can shape just about any dog to even pick up something, to pick up a bottle for you by simply just marking it going near the bottle, marking it for sniffing it, marking for touching it with its nose. Anytime it does a little bit of behavior, you can mark it. Matter of fact, at the high school I work with, pretty much all my students, without ever touching the rat, putting them in a plain bin, I showed videos in the intro video, were able to train their rats to pick up little ping pong balls and even put them in baskets without ever touching the rat, right? Just simply marking by prompting, by giving the rat nothing but a ball to interact with, and marking the rat when it does the behavior that they want. When the rat does a little bit more, they don't get rewarded for the previous behavior anymore. That was further away from the goal behavior. And you'll be surprised what you can do, all right? But anything complicated that's multiple steps is generally going to go to the chaining at that part. When can we check off marking? Very simple. Is when the dog or the animal, this really works for any animal, consistently does the behavior with the prompt, all right? Then we can check it off, all right? Next lecture will be fading, all right? When we can mark and we can then fade off of all the prompts and the dog just does it on a cue, suddenly we have something really cool that the clients really, really love and are proud of, okay? Dave says prompting, chaining, behavior correct. What do you guys, let me see. So there's questions here. So Art says, so a lure is a prompt, but not all prompts are lure. Right. Yes. Thank you, Art. Prompt is a very broad term. Anything that you can think of that you do that encourages the animal to do the behavior is a prompt. Anything, all right, is a prompt. Luring is a specific type of prompt where you're having the animal follow something, all right? Anything that the dog wants to follow. Yep. So all luring is a prompt, but prompts are not lures, all right? And that's it. Let's see. Dave says, with Ace bringing and carrying things for me, didn't think to call it chaining, as I got him interested in it with prompting and went from there. Yeah. And there's, I'll give you an example. Like there's behaviors that you can accomplish. We're going to go into chaining, right? But if you're, it's very dynamic, dog training, where there's endless ways to create the same behavior. Something like simply having a dog lay down, right? You can lure the dog into the down. If you have a dog that's okay with it, you can prompt them sometimes by like putting a little pressure on their back, all right, or touching them in a certain way. But some dogs, it's not going to work for them, right? You can just wait. You can tire the dog out and then put them on, and then bring them into the house. And when they lay down on their own, you could wait and you could mark it and give, there's a lot of different ways. But even like bringing objects, right? Some dogs, the easiest way is if they naturally pick up things, right? You could mark it. The dog brings anything to you, You could praise them, right? You could praise it and then give them something for it, right? And you have that. And then if the dog will consistently do something, if you consistently can bring them around a certain object and they consistently pick it up and bring it to you, right? You have the dog in a small room. It could start off with a toy, something easy that the dog always picks up naturally. The dog picks up that toy and you prompt the dog over to you any way you can. You praise the dog and give the dog a treat when it lets it go. You can shape it, right? You can shape it where it might just be its toy, but then you might roll up a magazine and the dog is like, oh, in this area, in this situation, last time I picked up my toy, I get this treat. There's something else over here. Whatever you do to prompt, you could be pointing towards it or whatever. When the dog does it, you could reward. This is just marking a behavior, and you shape it. You shape it and shape it to what you want to the behavior that you want. But it's all marking, right? But we can do more deeper videos on even shaping. Even there's lots of tricks to shaping. Chaining, definitely we need a whole video towards that. But we definitely do have in our knowledge base. We do have our 4.0 one. It's just not. Let's say the search thing is a little slow. Intro to shaping and chaining. All right, so we do have a video here. Intro to shaping and chaining, but we're gonna make a better presentation. But if you want to dive deeper into this, is just creating the behavior. There's more basics on this, but this is 50 minutes. So I can't give it justice by trying to talk about it quickly. All right. So that's going to be, let's see, we got Art says, so if you're teaching bring and dog on its own, bring it to you, wouldn't it be good idea to tell the dog good bring is to do with another command of leash in the woods for the purpose of marking a behavior? Anything, all right? Anything that works for you that can get the dog to bring something to you will work, all right? So if you tell the dog bring and it brings it to you and the dog brings it to you, I wouldn't change up a marker, right? So for instance, if you're saying good boy as a marker, I wouldn't then say good bring or good sit or good down at the end of the command that the dog does, because then it's harder to build a command structure where the dog, because the bring, and this is why this goes into next lesson, right, is part of, that would be part of fading, that would be part of fading the prompt, all right, is we want to have a prompt. The prompt for bring, for example, would usually be, for dogs that I've trained to bring things to me, is I looked and pointed at something and I would tell the dog to bring. So if the dog's name was Rex, I would say, Rex, bring. And I would point to something. And I wanted the dog to see where I was looking and pointing. That's why anything directional, look, I suggest three-way points, make it easy for the dog. Eyes, fingers, toes. Bring. Dog would say, the dog goes, picks it up, but then the praise is just good boy, just like anything else. All right. But that's for next lecture. All right. I want to keep these, I don't want these lectures to go too long. We'll do it in chunks. All right. So I'll be back Wednesday. You can do Q&A on more questions on this lecture and any lecture on the questions on Wednesday, and I will be next lesson. I'm gonna do fading off the prompts, which will answer more of these questions, more in depth. All right.